computer there. There we go. Hey, just a quick housekeeping thing. We switched to more automation in the last week because the group is starting to grow and we're starting to answer a lot of questions outside of this group. Did anybody have any issues with that formal email that said, hey, Monday call had the beautiful background and the logo and everything? You could click the link to drop it into your calendar. It had the Zoom link right there. Anybody have any problems with that? Raise your hand. Okay, perfect. So we're trying to automate it, make it a little bit easier for everybody, and up our game as this thing progresses. So as I did on the first call, I read a quote, or I should say a real brief blog by Andy Frisella. I know Clayton's pretty familiar with Andy, and some of you guys listen to his podcast, but Andy resonates with me on so many levels. And I think probably the number one level is that he just cuts all the clutter out and he goes straight to the point. There's no bullshit with Andy, and when I read his messages, as opposed to like the neat stuff I get from David Meltzer, which are all valuable, and I'll share some of those in the future, but Andy's just like straight to the point. So I feel like his message that I pulled from last week is appropriate for tonight's call. And the subject of tonight's call is values. Okay. I'm going to I'll put you on mute, Jim. All right. So the topic of his email blast is set massive goals. Set massive goals. I'm going to go ahead and read this and then I'll touch on it. Most people say that setting small attainable goals is designed to build confidence through minimal achievement. The reality is it builds complacency, mediocrity, and sets limits on your success. You have to start thinking much bigger. I don't care what you've been told by your teachers, your family, and your loved ones. The real reason why most people never build the life they want is because they have confined themselves to small goals and small thinking. Your attainable and realistic goals are really just setting limits on your subconscious beliefs. And your subconscious beliefs will determine your reality, the effort you put in, and the quality of the actions you take. When you set massive goals, you are freeing your mind to find a path to those destinations. Your thoughts, your ideas, your actions, everything will start to align with achieving this massive goal. When this happens, those small and attainable goals will actually automatically, and you will quickly pass them by one on your way to greatness. Always remember, average goals turn into average lives. Massive goals turn into legendary lives, even if you fall short. And so this resonates with me a lot, actually. And I'll just give you a personal story as it relates to that. When I was working with David Meltzer, we were talking about my work in Mexico and the winery that we're importing wines from. And if you know anything about that business of mine, a percentage of our profits go back to the orphanages down there in the Baja region. And I've been supporting those orphanages for over 30 years. And I said to Dave, we were talking about goals. I said, well, my goal is to donate $100,000 to these orphanages. And through the years, it's been 5, 10 grand, 15, maybe got close to 20 a couple of years in a row. And Dave says, whoa, wait a minute. Why would you limit yourself? Why would you say $100,000? Why not be the biggest donor from the United States to the Baja orphanages? Why would you stop short of that? Like, why would you already put yourself in confinement? And I put a lot of thought into that, and he's right. And it's just like what Andy's talking about with your own goals. Set massive goals. And I promise you, if you work towards those, you will see things start to click off the box like he mentioned. And all of a sudden you're doing and living exactly what you intended to do. And I'm a huge believer in our thoughts. Palin lives over by me and Rod's been to my house. Next door, I have this 20-acre property that I wanted to buy. And I pitched him. He wanted too much. He said no. I pitched him again, put another offer, and he said no. I'm like, well, it looks like I'm not going to get that property. But on a daily basis, and maybe you've heard this story from me before, on a daily basis, when I ran that fence line, I had said to myself, like, I'm going to have that property. I wanted to bring cattle over. I wanted cows down there. Well, through a number of circumstances, Ultimately, the property did sell to somebody else, but the new owner has no idea what he's going to do with it. So I was able to approach him with my thoughts and my vision of what I was going to do down there. And that was put cows down there. I said, look, I want to lease 10 acres. Are you willing? And he said, yeah, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do with that place. Go ahead. So ultimately, my thoughts and my actions allowed me to achieve what my real goal was. It wasn't necessarily to buy the place. It was to have a place to put my cows. So that's the life I'm living now. So I want to encourage everybody, as you're members of this group, and we're talking about values and goals, is that you set massive goals, not little goals, but set massive goals, and realign and go back to them and make sure that they're beyond your reach so that you can keep working towards them. And you'll be much more satisfied in the outcome of setting massive goals. Because like you said at the end, even if you fall short, you're so far much ahead of what your limiting goals were. All right. Tonight's topic was values. And, you know, I coach a lot about values with my clients. And I know that I've discussed values with some people in this room, and maybe this will be a little bit redundant, but, you know, I look at my values every single day and I make sure that they play a role in my life every single day. And it allows me to realign when I'm not. And so what I want to encourage everybody to do is to start thinking about, what are your real values? What is important to you? And as you look to the future to create your goals and your visions and your businesses, that you align that with your real values. Okay. So I'm going to walk through mine just so you have a clear example of what values look like in paper. And I'll give you a couple examples of how I apply those to my decision-making process or to my business. Okay. My values in this order. And to me, it's important to put them in order so you know which ones get the priority and the majority of the decision-making process. Okay. So my values: God, family, health, giving back, then time to do those things. And the last thing is business, actually making money, being away from all those other things. Okay. So how do these values go beyond this paper and become something important in business, right? Well, this is the Entrepreneur Syndicate. We're hoping that everybody here has an entrepreneurial spirit and is looking to go a direction in their lives that will put them where they want to be based on those now massive goals, right? So when I look at mine, again, to give an example, family is number 2. I'm not going to make a business decision that's going to take away the value of the family and the role that they play in my life. Okay. So I've got 30 plus years in the restaurant business industry. Clay, I can go down there and run your restaurant tomorrow if I needed to, right? And in my mind, I would have a lot of pleasure in doing that personally. I love it. I love creating menus. I love working with staff and customers coming in. I love to be in the kitchen and make something and see it on the special menu for the day or for the night and get the accolades. Oh, that was the best meatloaf I've ever had, or whatever it is, right? I love all that. But I know that the restaurant business is 10 to 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. As Clay's smiling, he's like, yeah, I know. It doesn't stop. And so that business, as good as I might be at it, and I made a lot of money in that business, it does not align with my value of the family being my second priority, right? Now, I could put God into into that business of being a restaurant owner. You know, I could proclaim my faith and, you know, people would know me for my faith and in my ownership of the business. But when I moved to number 2, which is family, all of a sudden that goes out the window. And unfortunately, that is my number 2 priority. So the restaurant business doesn't work for me. So hopefully you can see just through that example how values should play an important role in where you go with your massive goals and what you decide to do from a business perspective. And we're all different. Maybe family isn't your number 2 priority. And I don't mean to give anybody a guilt trip that that's my second priority. What you have to know is that I waited till I was 46 to have my first child, spent my whole life making money, not thinking about family. Now, all of a sudden I realized what I missed, and that has become the top of my list, right? So don't feel like if you said, well, business is my top priority, I need to accomplish these things. I'm not going to criticize anybody for what their priorities are, but have your values and know what they are and build your goals around those values. So I'll give you the opposite of focused on my values, and health is my number 3 value. And some of you know that I was a big proponent and advocate for 75 hard. Actually, real quick, Jim, what day are you on? You've got to unmute yourself, buddy. What day are you on 75 hard?
I finish tomorrow night.
Ah, awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It's been a rough couple of weeks. We had a family trip a weekend ago, and then yesterday was our Greek Easter.
Yeah.
So a lot of food set on the table yesterday, but 2 days left.
Hey, not to put you on the spot, but can you just share a little bit about the value that you've gotten out of it? Maybe some of the substantial difference you see, as well as your family.
It's interesting. I was thinking about this the other day. I feel like I didn't gain a lot in the discipline space. It feel like being able to do a single day, commit to the water and everything, that to me was more, it was, shared this with you previously, really understanding how many other people in my life suck on my time and how much time I lose because I'm always saying yes to family. If I want to go work out, if I want to do some research, do some work at night, there's always something that can draw on that time. And, the days and the weeks go by, really spending a lot of dedication and time now to learning. I'm going through books as fast as I can. I'm not going to stop the reading. I'll definitely take a break from 75 hard, but the reading, the walks at night, the amount of podcasts and the amount of learning that I've done over the 75 days is crazy. It's more than I've done in the last 3-4 years. And I feel like I've grown a lot just in that space. And I've picked up podcasts from yours to Andy Frisella to, The Bull, just all over the place. And I've learned a lot in a lot of different areas to really try to help me figure out which direction I want to go, as next steps.
I love it. And your family, I think you mentioned before that they've noticed a difference in you and they've observed your discipline throughout the process of getting it done, right?
Right. Early on, my kids are 14 and 16. They were like, really, you're doing this? And they kind of brushed it off because my wife had tried it about a year ago and stopped after about a month. And they just kind of like, okay. And then after about a month, they were like, oh, dad's going for his walk, or dad's got to go to the gym, or, they started planning their life around mine. And then they started seeing, I put my mind to something. I said, I'm going to do it and I'm going to go through. And they start learning a little bit. And I start sharing with them some of the knowledge I'm getting from books. I'm trying to get them to read some of the books that I've read, and really share some of the knowledge that I'm learning from you in this group and from the Lion's Den. And really just trying to give them nuggets of different things that I'm learning and stuff that I'm learning now at 52, that I wish I would have known when I was 16.
Yeah. That's awesome, Jim. Thank you for sharing your story. You look healthy, by the way. I think you lost some in the face a little bit there. Maybe it's no sugar.
A little bit. I wanted to gain during this.
Yeah, it's hard. Well, thank you. So I was talking about health and I put you on the spot, Jim, there. So I appreciate you sharing your story. We're not always perfect, and health being my third priority, I've let that slide. So right now I've really got to make a conscious effort to bring the health portion of my values back into my daily routines. So I wanted to give some positive examples on how they work, but it also, for me, it identifies my shortcomings in my overall values. And so when you look at health as an example, I'm not doing my family any good if I'm not the healthiest person I can be. If I'm not exercising and being of a value physically, then I've really got to get after what those values are. So by having and knowing what my values are, it allows me to realign and readjust when I need to. So if I get too far off the dotted line, as I am with health, it's like, okay, I know where I got to be and I can get myself back there. Okay. So I really want to encourage everybody to focus on your own personal values as you go through the process of these life changes or entrepreneurial ventures, or even where you're at in your current careers. So to transition that a bit from personal values, let's talk about, again, also assigning those values to your business. Okay. So last week we talked about teaching and what it is to be a teacher and how you evolve that into your businesses. What about core values in your business? So if you're looking at starting something or evolving something you're already currently working in, or if you've got a career and you're looking to make a substantial difference in your department, what are the core values that you have there? And the key to that is not only understanding what works for you as an individual, especially if it's your company, but looking at the company and what your values stand for as a company, so that you can then not only implement them if you don't have them, but utilize them to attract and attain or retain customers, right? So I'll give you another story for anybody that's been on the West Coast or Utah or some of these other states close to the West Coast. In-N-Out Burger. I spent 13 years working there as a store manager, hiring manager, all the above, historian. I taught some classes on the company history. They were very keen and upfront with what their values were at a substantial pivot point within the history of the company. So from 1948 to 1983, they had 28 restaurants. They're successful. The lines were down the driveway, as maybe you've seen it at In-N-Outs, and they had success, but they didn't have substantial growth and that culture that people that's all they could talk about was In-N-Out. The dad had passed away that started the company, left it to his son, and the son was a visionary, and he was a huge fan. And I'm almost hesitant to say this with today's culture, but he was a huge fan of the University of Disney. And what he loved about the University of Disney is it taught you how to really have the world's best customer service. And that was a value that meant a lot to Rich, who owned In-N-Out now. And he came to us in the 80s, and keep in mind, our business model there was, if you ran a store, the company split the profit with you. Okay. So it was your job as a store manager to be as profitable as possible, because you're going to see a split in that. But he went to all the store managers, 28 at the time. He says, look, we want to retain the best employees in the business. We want to attract the best, and we want to be the best. And to do that, we're going to have to increase our salaries and our pay scale for every single employee that works for the company, effective next month on the 1st. And what that looked like, the reality was, I was making $2.95 an hour as a part-time employee. I got a raise to $6 an hour, so almost double. And then the pay scale for everybody else above me, up to managers, all got a little increase. And what that increase did is it created a culture that attracted the highest caliber of people. So imagine you're looking for a fast food job and McDonald's is hiring $2.95, but you can go to In-N-Out for $6 an hour. And so we weeded out the weak. We brought in the good ones, because now we had the pick of the litter. We were paying more than anybody else. So we picked the best ones, and then we asked the best ones to bring their friends in so we could pick more of the best ones, right? So this is, again, mid 80s. Fast forward to today, that company's worth almost $30 billion, has over 400 restaurants, right? They're known worldwide for quality, friendliness, and, the product itself, their burgers, right? But great customer service. And it's all because of this pivotal moment in the mid 80s, when they were super small, to start placing an emphasis on their core values, right? And that's long-term success and consistently focused. They've never wavered. And if you heard some of my story, my brother's the CEO of that company, had been there 35 years. The important things to note about that is they retained people. And having core values helps create retention, not only for good people, but for your customers, because those values will bleed through to them and it'll give them a reason either to stay as employees or to buy your product or utilize your services for long periods of time, because they know exactly who you are and what they're going to get and what you're willing to deliver. Right. So internet's a little bit of an interesting example because it's a food chain, but nobody expects those caliber of values in a fast food chain. So it's a good story to tell. So what I ask is, as you build out your business plans for your potential new businesses, whatever that might be, whether you're writing a book and you've got to build a plan around that, or you're starting a podcast, got to build a plan around that. What are your core values for that plan? Okay. Now, once you've established the values, then you can aggressively go after your growth models, right? Because now you've got a map. Here's what I am, here's what I stand for, here's what I'm delivering. And then you can start aggressively going after new business and new clients, because now you know exactly what you want and you know exactly what you're delivering, on a daily basis. Rod made a comment. I appreciate you giving it to me direct there, but values, and it's the same thing as example with internet. They become your brand and you become a part of it. The people become a part of it. Just like, I use Disney as an example, people go there to escape, right? They become a part of what that brand is delivering, is some escapism. I think they're trying to escape too far over the line these days. So I won't be going anytime soon, but you get the picture, right? People want to become a part of what your brand is and what you're doing. It's why people wear branded t-shirts. Some people are familiar with the Lion's Den. They've got their shirt out right now, Be Free and Lion's Den, because they're branding their core values identifies us with us as consumers or as people that want to be a part of that group, right? So, again, with values, you can look at your approach towards those values, getting those messages out there. And if you're crystal clear on them, your customers can tell new customers, or their friends and family and people they come across, more about you very specifically, right? This is what that brand stands for. This is what this person stands for. This is why I'm involved with it. So, Will's working on a podcast. If Will presents his values or his reasoning behind that podcast, people go, hey, this is why I listen to Will's podcast, right? So again, values plays such an important role in who we are and what we do as it relates to our success and happiness of the project. And I'll wrap up on these values here in a minute so you guys can start asking questions. And I hope you've come to the table with some questions, whether it's about values or not. But, the thing about values and being upfront with it, especially if you're starting something new, is that you can get early buy-in because of the clarity of why you're doing it, right? Who doesn't want to work with a guy? I guess there's probably a percentage that says, hey, God and family and health are my three biggest priorities, and I'm going to kick butt to do whatever it's going to take, to do the job for you. Ultimately, like, wow, okay, seems like probably a good guy. He's probably honest, cares about his family, wants to work hard, so putting your values up front will bring early adopters to what you're doing, whatever it is. Even, podcast example. Here's what we're on. Here's the type of people we're interviewing and why, and the value that it's going to bring to you. So in Will's case, it's going to be a great historical lesson with an authentic group of people, right? I'm not going to spill the beans for you there, Will, but we're happy to be working with you on that. So, okay, let's throw some questions out there. And I've got some other tidbits to throw in and out within the conversation. I want to remind everybody that this Q&A should bring a value to you, not just on what I'm talking about, but what your needs are for the week. Okay, I'm happy to get the calls outside of this, but we can also collectively go through that and bring you a little bit more reinforcement of the things that we're talking about, how and why. So Rod, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I'm going to tie this in. You had a thing on your Instagram today where you were talking about your mentor, horsemanship and having a mentor. And one of the things I've always said was, I never had a mentor. And my wife reminded me that I've had hundreds, but that's picking up crumbs. having a mentor, they can give you a meal, right? And so I think one of the things that I got out of your message today on Instagram, your story, was that you learn your values from a mentor. And if you were like me, you didn't have a mentor, this is a mentoring group. That's what Y.E.S is. It's a mentoring group. So I guess if you would just talk a little bit about how you got your value set. I know the horsemanship was one and your grandfather was one, but if you could just speak to learning when you learn that value set and how important it is to figure that out.
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's worth noting. I always knew that I had certain values in my life. For example, God played a role, health played a role. I've been giving back since I was 26 years old. I'm 54 now, so that played a big role in my life. But it wasn't until I started working with Dave Meltzer, to be honest with you, I don't know, I guess it's been 4 or 5 years ago now. And Dave says, well, Jim, what are your values? And I said, what do you mean? And I started rattling off goals. He goes, no, not goals. What are your values? What's important to you foundationally in how you make your decisions? And I had to look at it differently. And I started rattling off a bunch of stuff. He goes, okay, so where's your priorities at? What's important to you now? And what's interesting is it's those values that brought me to Montana, because I had just sold my shares in the tequila company and stepped away. And it was time to make a decision about what I was going to do next, if anything, and started this wine import business where we were giving back to the orphanages. And I thought, well, what's important to me? As I mentioned earlier in the call, I didn't have kids till I was 46 years old. I thought, well, my faith is first. I've got a new wife, and, we're involved in the church, and God's always played a big role in my life since I was 6 years old. So I know that was an easy one. But then I thought, I don't want anything to get in the way of myself and my family and the time that I can spend with my kids. I didn't waste 46 years, but I spent 46 years without them. And I'm going to go all in on these kids and give them everything that I didn't have or what I feel like they should need. So that immediately fell second, right? And then I realized, because I was 46, I thought, well, if I'm not healthy, I'm not going to be able to toss those kids around very long. So that came a factor. And I joined a private training gym specifically. My first day there, I told the trainer, I said, I want to be the healthiest I've ever been in my life when I turn 50. By the time my kids are big enough to throw around in the yard, I want to be the healthiest I've ever been. So that became important. And I realized as I started to check these boxes off that they all fell in line with who I am and where I wanted to be. And ever since I've been in Montana now, it's just over 3 years, following these values and these principles has served me better than anything I've done in my entire life. I've been happier. I've had more money, more time to do what I want to do with my kids, and I haven't regretted the decisions I've made because of using these values, as my checkpoint, right? So I didn't go off and do something. Well, here's a perfect example. I have a client, he's on retainer. He wants me to move back to California. He'd probably double my retainer, right? But if I did that, it would throw a couple of these things right out of whack. And it would be more about the money, which is my last value, and not about God, family, and health and giving back, right? So I've made a conscious decision not to chase the money anymore in my life and really focus on my other values. So the point is, and I know I said it 20 times already now on the call, is you can use these as your guiding light to where you go in your life. And the earlier you figure it out, the better, because, you can make a lot of mistakes along the way. And most of you guys are at the point right now where you can make these really solid decisions and pick a career path or an entrepreneurial path that will make a difference in your happiness in the future. So good question. All right. Other questions? I'm gonna call some of you out. Okay, Clayton. You're at the top of the list. You're working on a book. You're working on some marketing back into that. What are your struggles? What do you want to share? If anything, or, The floor is yours for a moment. Let's bring some collective wisdom to what you're doing, if you like. And I don't mean to call people out and embarrass you. I want to make sure that I force the value into you on these calls.
Okay. Struggles right now. Where do I go once the book comes out? We're looking late June, early July. Should be published, should be out on Amazon. Looking for a #1 bestseller. Hopefully, Mike.
Yeah, you'll get it.
You get it. What do I do from there? You know, that was my call with you earlier this week, or last week, I should say. You know, what can I do with this? What kind of funnels can I create? My book, for those of you who didn't know, I'm creating a book on mental performance for high school and college athletes. Growing up, I never had anything like that. I've played sports all through college. I've coached all through college. I've been to state championships. I've won, I've lost. I've got over 20 years of coaching experience, and I wanted to bring this to an area where I feel it's very underdeveloped. You know, unless you're a professional team or a high-level D1 team, you don't know about these things. You never get taught about it. Breathing techniques, visualization, all that kind of stuff. I always wondered, where would I have been if someone would have taught me this when I was a freshman or sophomore in high school, and I could develop it over the years. So I kind of put this together in a book. I've got a couple very good friends in the MLB world, the mental performance coaches for a couple teams there. They've been helping me along, and they've been pushing me to do this. So it's finished, should be out, but what do I do from here? Do I do group coaching? Do I do one-on-one coaching? Do I, sell myself to some college teams, local college teams, like, hey, can I come do talks for you? That kind of stuff. So that's where I'm struggling. And then, a little bit of imposter syndrome. Hey, I've never actually done this. Yes, I teach it on a nightly basis to my players, but at the same time, I've never gone before a group like this and just taught strictly. Usually I get to yell at them afterwards and tell them what to do. So.
Love it.
Can I jump in here real quick, Jim?
Yeah, go for it.
Thanks. Clayton, this is something I'm going to tell.
Rod, you went to mute.
Sorry, there we go. You got me out. Okay, so Jim and I were talking earlier, and I was actually doing a consult today with a client, and she had some questions about things, and I had no idea how much the wealth of information that I had and how I was able to help her. And it's not that I was an expert in the area that she was talking about, but I've got enough experience in areas that are like that I knew what questions to ask and how to dig for it. And so you are the expert. Don't sell yourself short on this when you want to be, speaking at college engagements and that sort of thing. The fact that you've lived this is more important than a degree or the fact that you've made a living doing it somehow. So I'm just going to tell you, you need to rely on your instinct and what you've been doing, and just believe that you are the expert, because you've got value that nobody else can offer because of your experience. You're unique, and that has value. So, get that roadblock out of your way right now. That might open that whole avenue up to speaking engagements and that sort of thing. But I heard it in your voice. You're not. I've been there myself. I'm not the expert. I'm not qualified, and I'm telling you, you are.
Yeah, Rod, that's a good point. Clayton, thanks for sharing where you're at and what your challenge is right now, because imposter syndrome, and I like that you brought that up. We all get that, right? And that is us being genuine. It's us being honest. It's us being vulnerable. But the reality is, you've done the time. You understand what needs to be done, and you have the capacity to be that person. And I think that that's where, mentoring and coaching comes into play, because a lot of times, like I got with Dave Meltzer, he picked me up to say, look, Jim, you are that person, right? And as you start to walk down that path, you still might be going through the motions because you're struggling with, like, why me? Why am I this guy? Well, if it's not you, then who's it going to be, first of all, right? But as you start to work with people. Maybe it's one person privately, then maybe it's two, then maybe, it's the local high school you're volunteering, but you'll realize, hey, I do have the capacity to be this. I do own the skill set. I do have the time. I do have the passion, but imposter syndrome is kind of the enemy that works against us. And that's, again, I think there's a tremendous value in being around like-minded people that we have in this group. We're all trying to achieve something different, right? I felt that way when I launched my podcast. Like, who the hell wants to listen to me? What do I have to say? Why would anybody want to be on my show? But I started walking down that road and I called a bunch of people, like, oh, what do you think? Is it good? Oh, yeah, it's good. Maybe do this, maybe do that. I just was looking for reassurance, but here I am, 60,000 downloads later. That's a lot of fucking downloads. Like, there's a lot of people listening to something I had no confidence on day one. So I want to encourage everybody to, if you're willing to put yourself out there for something that you're passionate about and it's a business and that field, then avoid the imposter syndrome and go after it. Now, what I said to Clay, and this is the same thing I would say to anybody, like in this particular project, and we'll be talking about this on your podcast later, is find where that, I call it the golden egg, right? Where is your core business going to happen at? Where do you want to drive your traffic to? Okay, so with the book, you may want to drive traffic to group lessons where you're charging a big fee, or maybe it is to public speaking to major league players. Whatever that is, utilize that as your funnel and your guide to where you take that book. We've learned a lot about, especially if you spend any time on Instagram these days, there's a lot of books coming out within our circle of people that we all like to follow, not amongst the masses though, but amongst our group. And those books are tools to open up doors for these opportunities where your real golden egg is, right? So I'll look forward to continuing doing some work with you on finding those guidelines and what's going to get you to that golden egg. The days of a big publisher picking up your book and you're going to get $100,000 royalty agreement are probably gone, but it's certainly a tool like that book will bring way more in revenue over the long haul because it validates who you are, what you stand for, and why. And if anybody's in question, you can go, hey, I got the book. Here you go. Right. So, and don't ever make the mistake of thinking that Clay was a Black Hawk pilot. You were an Apache pilot. I made that mistake. What's the difference? I mean, I know the difference, but what's the unsaid truth about the difference?
The Black Hawk is a transport. The Apache is a gunship.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I have a lot of faith that you're going to get your job done because of some of the things that you've been through and your training. Apply what you learned there to this project, right? All right. How about other questions? We got a few minutes. Okay, I'm going to call you out. Hit your unmute. Mainly because I already called out Jim once. Palin, you might want to be thinking about something too. So Will, and I'm not going to tell him the background, what it is, but Will is interested in doing a podcast. So we're going to do some side work on helping him launch a podcast, which I think it's a wonderful tool. The cost of admission on podcasting is very reasonable, and you could reach a broad audience with a limited amount of work to get that going. And Will, I know that we're going to address your challenges and your startup when we meet later this week. Can you tell us why you wanted to start a podcast or what your motivation was?
Just a little bit of background on what exactly my podcast is. It's going to be basically a historical analysis of the interface between humans and firearms. And so that could be anything from like the 1600s and forward. One of my primary reasons for getting into it is I have a very, very large passion for firearms. And as a result of that, I've gotten the opportunity to hang out with some folks that would otherwise be very difficult to hang out with just because of my passions. As a result of that, I wanted to record a lot of the lessons that, of gunfighters, of soldiers, of cops, private investigators, of different people who have carried a gun, pointed guns at people, and fought other humans with, excuse me, other humans with firearms. I find the subject very fascinating, and as a result of that, I wanted to record all of those lessons because I've read numerous accounts, I've read different books, but I've never found a singular source where somebody wanted to find a just wanted to have an idea of what it's like to carry a gun for a living, where you would find something like that. And so that was predominantly my main goal.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for sharing what that is. And as I mentioned, I'm going to be doing some work with Will later this week on how to launch that. So he doesn't quite know what the struggles are yet, besides he doesn't know the world of podcasting. Here's what I love about what his idea is. Okay. I am a proponent for firearms. I have plenty here. I'm not an expert, but what I find fascinating about Will's project is he's found a niche market. As he suggested, he couldn't find it anywhere, right? So he's going to be providing a value to gun owners or gun enthusiasts. And by the way, my wife sells retail apparel at a lot of the gun shows here in town. And, if you've never been to a gun show, these places are packed for, ours is 3 days long. These places are packed all day, lines out the door waiting to get in. So it's not like he's approaching a market that there's nobody in, right? So when you look at his ability to monetize a business and a passion, I'm going, okay, this guy's got something. He found a niche, he's going to fill it, and then he'll be able to expand off of that. So I say, yeah, we could probably make not only some great podcast content with some wonderful guests. Maybe you can get a perspective from Clayton, what it's like to fire out of a warship in the air, but with some wonderful guests, and then we could monetize that through a number of different ways, whether that's a podcast sponsor because he's speaking to an audience. Maybe there's a gun manufacturer that says, you know what, you have my exact target audience, that's worth $500 a show, whereas I might not be able to get $500 a show because I'm very broad-based, right? So there's an opportunity there. He can do a book to support it. He can do public speeches to support gun enthusiasts. He could have a booth at the gun shows where he's generating revenue. So there's so many cool offshoots of this very niche item that has a big audience. So, Will, I look forward to, talking more about this and helping you with that project. And looks like, Clayton, Will wants to connect with you. And if you guys want to share your information back and forth here, that's what this group is about. So connect with each other, be values to each other, the whole bit, have some fun with the group. So, all right, a few more minutes. Anybody's got any other comments, questions, problems that's going to get them through the week?
I want to make one comment.
Yeah.
And that is, especially because we started off by talking about 75 hard. And I don't know if everyone here knows what 75 hard is. I've not done it, but I've done something similar. And it's life-changing. But I guess what I wanted to say is there are some people that know they need to make changes, and it may seem so overwhelming that they can't see that big change. They can't see it 3 months down the road, or, a complete health change, a complete makeover, that sort of thing. But I can tell you one small step, one small thing, it's those little degrees. It's like, okay, I'm not going to drink Red Bulls or something. I'm going to cut that out. I'm going to replace it with water or juice or, a sports drink or something like that. Little changes do add up. So it gets you on the road to commitment. And so don't think that I can't just jump in and do this. You can do little things, and those little things will lead you to the big thing. So, and that's not a cop out. Don't get me wrong. This isn't a cop out. This is just do what you can with where you're at and what you've got to work with. And that's not just for health things, but even for business, even for those ideas, do what you can. How many people want to write a book? Well, how many can say they have? How many people want to write a screenplay? I have. My wife and I wrote one. We marketed it to Hollywood. didn't go anywhere. But how many people can say that? A little thing. You need to start. You need to start the train moving. It'll gain its own momentum. So that's all I had on that, Jim.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. Getting started is sometimes the hardest part. And if you're that person that's somewhat of a procrastinator where like, oh, I want to do it, but you never do it. Even starting 5 minutes a day, like literally scheduling 5 minutes towards that goal or objective, you will be further down the road when you're actually ready to do that. My first podcast in my mind, I don't want to say it was a disaster because I put some work into what I was going to talk about in my format, but I got done. I thought, wow, did I really just put that out into the airwaves? But now when I look back at that body of work, I'm going, okay, that start resulted in something substantial. Just like my tequila business, I'd get home from my 12-hour-a-day job at Kettle One as the vice president there. I'd come home and put another couple hours into a business plan to start my tequila company, and maybe it wasn't all day every day, but it was a little bit of time. Ultimately, I raised $12 million with that time span put together to start a company, so getting started is probably the most important thing. And then I've been seeing some posts recently that really resonate with me. It talks a lot about, being the best person you can be and how health is an important factor in that, not just what you eat, but your workouts and also what you put in your mind. And Jim, I love that you talked about how many books you're reading and the fact that you're not going to stop reading books. I've slowed down on the books, but I'm still reading because I realized I'd walked away from books for at least 10 years and how much value you can get in those books. So Jim, thank you for sharing that. So I'm going to wrap the call up here. We're a few minutes short of an hour. I'm going to go do my civic responsibility and run to a school board meeting that I've asked them to delay 15 minutes so I can get there. I've spoken to a few of you on the side. I know Rod had as well. I would seriously consider taking advantage of our time in these early days as our membership grows. If you need something outside of these calls, hit us up. We're here for you. We're willing to support you. And we'll send out next. Well, Rod, do you know what next week's topic is? You're on mute.
Yeah, next week's topic is personality tests, and how that factors into being an entrepreneur. So any of you have had Myers or DISC tests or anything like that, we're going to kind of skim the surface of all that and put it in perspective for why it's important, why you need to know it, and then you can do with it what you want. But that'll be a start of some interesting conversations.
Awesome. Thanks, Rod. So again, there's a lesson for every week. So the first half, the second half is both time for questions on the lesson, but time to help you with what you're working on and give answers, because you might be working on what you feel to be the silliest thing or of no substance to the group, but it might be just the thing the other person needs. And I found that, like in my Lion's Den calls, a lot of times people ask a question, maybe it doesn't seem that important, but it's like, whoa, I was thinking about that. And that's part of the objective of leaving a fair amount of time for that Q&A. So don't be afraid to reach out and say something. I will tell you this, I was on a call. This guy's name is JJ Live. He's a marketer, big marketer, millions of followers. And I was on a Zoom call with him with a dozen people. And he called people out pretty hard. Like, oh, Jim, turn on your video and I want to hear from you. And he'd ask every question. It got to the point where it's kind of annoying. We'll never do that. But I do appreciate participation, and we will call on you a little bit here and there just because we want to hold people accountable and make sure that they're getting out some value. So, okay, Rod posted his number in the notes there, 406-261-0893. And with that, since there's no more questions, I'm going to sign off, go do my civic responsibility. Look forward to seeing you guys next week. Thank you. Appreciate it.